Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that sounds innocent enough. Gas stations, energy drinks, and a legal substance you can buy next to beef jerky. But here's the twist. This one's being called gas station heroin, and it's quietly wreaking havoc across America, while hiding in plain sight on convenience store shelves. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. A huge thank you to the viewer who suggested this topic. Your input genuinely shapes what we cover, and it helps the channel grow in ways I'm incredibly grateful for. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Somehow it's always 2 AM somewhere. And hey, the channel's now live on Spotify too. Links in the description if you want to check it out there. Now dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise, get comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how something so dangerous could be sold so casually? What does a substance have to do to earn the nickname gas station heroin? How did we get to a place where opioid-like drugs sit on shelves between Monster Energy and Slim Jims? What happens to your body when you take Tianeptine? Could you accidentally buy something that might send you to the ER without even knowing it? And why isn't this illegal everywhere yet? Congratulations, you've just stepped into the bizarre, unregulated world of gas station pharmacology. The year is 2024, and the line between dietary supplement and dangerous drug has never been blurrier. Good luck. Let's start with the basics, because if you've never heard of Tianeptine, you're not alone. It sounds like something a chemistry professor invented while having a mild stroke. Tianeptine is technically an antidepressant, at least. That's what it was designed to be. In countries like France and some parts of Eastern Europe, it's prescribed under strict medical supervision to treat depression and anxiety. In controlled doses, it works on the brain's opioid receptors in a way that can stabilize mood. But here's where things get weird. In the United States, Tianeptine is not FDA approved for any medical use. It's not classified as a controlled substance in most states. Instead, it's sold as a dietary supplement or research chemical, slapped with vague labels like mood enhancer or cognitive booster, and stocked right there between the protein bars and caffeine pills. No prescription needed, no age verification required. Just walk in, pay a few bucks, and walk out with something powerful enough to ruin your life. The chemical name is tianeptine sodium, though you'll also see tianeptine sulfate floating around online. To understand why this matters, you need to know that tianeptine was originally developed in the 1960s by French researchers who were exploring new treatments for depression. They noticed that unlike traditional antidepressants that work solely on serotonin, tianeptine had a unique mechanism. It actually enhanced serotonin reuptake, while simultaneously acting on opioid receptors. Strange, right? Most drugs either increase or decrease serotonin availability. But tianeptine does something different. It modulates the system in ways scientists still don't fully understand. In its approved medical form, prescribed in France under the brand name Coxil or Starblon, tianeptine is given in tiny doses, 12.5 milligrams 3 times daily. At these levels, patients report reduced anxiety, improved mood, and better stress resilience without the sexual side effects or emotional numbing that often come with SSRIs like Prozac or Zoloft. It seemed like a miracle drug for a specific subset of patients. Doctors were cautiously optimistic. For decades, it remained a niche prescription, used primarily in Europe, barely known in the United States. Then came the Internet, and with it, the nootropics community, biohackers, self-experimenters, and people desperate for cognitive enhancement or mental health relief who couldn't access traditional care. They discovered tianeptine through online forums, imported it from overseas pharmacies, and started sharing their experiences. Some reported remarkable improvements in mood and focus. Others warned of rapid tolerance and dependency. But the genie was out of the bottle. American supplement companies saw an opportunity. If Tianeptine wasn't FDA approved but also wasn't explicitly banned, they could sell it as a dietary supplement. No clinical trials needed, no prescriptions required. Just package it, market it vaguely, and stock it in stores where regulations are loose and profits are high. Gas stations, truck stops, smoke shops, convenience stores in rural areas where addiction treatment is scarce and economic desperation runs deep. And here's the truly insidious part. The dosages being sold in it. These gas station bottles bear no resemblance to the medical doses used in France. We're talking about products containing 500, 700, even 1,000 milligrams per bottle, doses that would make a French psychiatrist's head explode. At these levels, Tianeptine stops being an antidepressant and becomes something else entirely. A potent opioid-like substance that floods your brain with dopamine, creates intense euphoria, and hooks you faster than you can say, "I thought this was just a supplement." So when you see that little bottle with the flashy label promising mental clarity or elevated mood, what you're actually looking at is a substance that acts on the same brain receptors as heroin, delivered in doses 20 to 50 times higher than what's considered medically safe, sold with zero oversight to anyone with $10 and a pulse. That's Tianeptine in America. Not a medication, not a supplement, a trap. So how did we end up here? How did a prescription antidepressant from France end up in a plastic bottle at a chevron next to the scratch-off lottery tickets? The answer is a legal loophole so wide you could drive a semi-truck through it. In the United States, the supplement industry is shockingly underregulated. Thanks to the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, companies can sell just about anything labeled as a supplement without needing FDA approval beforehand. As long as they don't make specific medical claims, like cures depression or treats opioid withdrawal, they're free to market their product. Tianeptine manufacturers figured this out fast. They started packaging Tianeptine in flashy bottles with names like Zaza Red, Tiana, TD Red, and Pegasus. The labels were intentionally vague, listing Tianeptine sodium as an ingredient buried among a cocktail of caffeine, vitamins, and herbal extracts. The marketing was subtle but effective. Energy, focus, mood support. It sounded harmless. It looked like a dietary supplement. And it was cheap, usually $5 to $15 a bottle. Here's how the gold rush actually unfolded. Around 2015, Tianeptine started appearing on the American market in small quantities, mostly sold online through nootropics vendors. These were niche websites catering to self-experimenters who wanted cognitive enhancement. The customer base was small but loyal, mostly young professionals, students, and tech workers looking for an edge. Then someone had a brilliant, terrible idea. Why limit sales to online orders when you could put this stuff in physical stores? The first gas stations to stock Tianeptine were likely in the South, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, states with high rates of opioid addiction, limited access to mental health care, and a population struggling with chronic pain and economic hardship. These weren't accidental choices. Manufacturers knew exactly what they were doing. They were targeting markets where people were desperate for relief and couldn't afford traditional medical care. The bottles were designed to look legitimate. Bright colours, professional fonts, ingredient lists that sounded scientific. Some included vitamins like B6 or B12 to justify the supplement label. Others added caffeine to mask the effects and make users think the energy they felt was just from a stimulant, not from an opioid-like substance flooding their brain. The branding was key. Names like Zaza Red sounded edgy, almost recreational, appealing to younger users. Others, like Tiana, sounded pharmaceutical and trustworthy, appealing to older folks who might mistake it for a real medication. Gas station owners were initially skeptical, but then they noticed something. The bottles sold. Fast. Customers came in, bought one, then came back an hour later for another, and another. Some customers bought 5-10 bottles at a time. The profit margins were incredible. A bottle that cost $1 or $2 wholesale sold for $10 to $15 retail. Do the math. Stock it near the register, watch it fly off the shelves, reorder, repeat. Word spread through distribution networks. Truck stops started carrying it. Corner stores in low-income neighborhoods stocked it. Smoke shops added it to their inventory alongside kratom and CBD products. Within a few years, Tianeptine had quietly colonized thousands of retail locations across the United States, operating entirely within the law, because technically, it was just a dietary supplement. The companies making these products became remarkably wealthy, remarkably fast. They operated with minimal overhead, just manufacturing, packaging and distribution. No research and development costs, no clinical trials, no marketing budgets beyond flashy labels. They didn't need to advertise because their product advertised itself. People who tried it once often became repeat customers within days, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. The product created its own demand through addiction. And here's the darkest part. These companies knew. They had to know. When you see the same customers coming back multiple times a day, when you hear reports of people spending hundreds of dollars a week, when poison control centers start calling to ask what's in your product, But knowing and caring are two different things. As long as it remained legal, as long as the money kept flowing, they kept manufacturing, kept distributing, kept stocking those shelves. It wasn't a gold rush by accident. It was engineered, a perfectly legal, perfectly predatory system designed to extract profit from human desperation, and it worked. Here's where Tianeptine stops being just another sketchy supplement and starts becoming genuinely dangerous. Unlike most antidepressants which work on serotonin or norepinephrine, Tianeptine acts on the brain's opioid receptors, the same receptors targeted by morphine, heroin, oxycodone and fentanyl. Yes, you read that. Right. The same receptors. At low, medically supervised doses, this action is mild and therapeutic. But at the doses people are taking from gas station bottles, it's a completely different story. Users report euphoria, relaxation, pain relief, and a warm, sedative high that feels eerily similar to opioids. Because neurologically speaking, it is acting like an opioid. This is why Tianeptine earned its street name, gas station heroin. It's not hyperbole, it's biochemistry. Let's break down what's actually happening inside your brain. Your mu-opioid receptors are part of your body's natural pain and reward system. When you experience pleasure, eating good food, hugging someone you love, accomplishing a goal, your brain releases endogenous opioids, natural chemicals that bind to these receptors and make you feel good. It's how your brain rewards behaviors that promote survival. But evolution didn't account for synthetic chemicals that can hijack this system. When Tianeptine floods into your bloodstream and crosses the blood-brain barrier, it doesn't gently modulate your opioid receptors the way your natural endorphins do. It slams into them like a freight train. The receptors activate intensely, triggering a massive release of dopamine in your brain's reward center, the nucleus accumbens. This creates a wave of euphoria far more intense than anything your natural brain chemistry could produce. It's not just pleasure, it's artificial, overwhelming chemical bliss. Your brain, sensing this flood of dopamine, immediately starts making adjustments. It's trying to maintain homeostasis, balance. So it begins down-regulating, reducing the number of opioid receptors available and decreasing their sensitivity. Think of it like your ears adjusting to a loud concert. At first, the music is overwhelming, but after a while, your hearing adapts and it seems quieter, even though the volume hasn't changed. Your brain is doing the same thing with Tianeptine, trying to protect itself from overstimulation. But here's the cruel catch. While your brain is downregulating in response to tianeptine, it's also reducing its natural opioid production. Why make endorphins when you're getting flooded with synthetic opioids? Your baseline mood and reward system start relying on tianeptine just to function normally. Without it, you're not just missing the high, you're operating below baseline, in a neurochemical deficit. This is physical dependence, and it develops frighteningly fast. Unlike traditional opioids like oxycodone or morphine, which can take weeks or months of regular use to create severe dependence, tianeptine seems to hook people in days. Some users report feeling withdrawal symptoms after just 3 to 5 days of regular use. Why? Scientists aren't entirely sure, but they suspect it has to do with tianeptine's unique pharmacology. It's not just an opioid agonist. It also affects glutamate signaling and neuroplasticity in ways that may accelerate the development of dependence. The comparison to heroin isn't just street slang. Studies have shown that tianeptine's binding affinity for mu-opioid receptors is significant, and at high doses, its effects closely mimic classic opioids. Users describe the same warm, sedated, pain-free euphoria. They describe the same compulsive redosing, and they describe the same nightmarish withdrawal, nausea, vomiting, muscle aches, anxiety, and an overwhelming psychological craving that makes every minute without the drug feel unbearable. What makes this especially insidious is that people taking tianeptine often don't realize they're essentially taking an opioid. They think they're taking a supplement, a mood booster, something safe and legal. So when the dependence sets in, they're blindsided. They didn't sign up for opioid addiction. They didn't go looking for heroin. They just bought a bottle from the gas station, and now their brain has been chemically restructured to need it. It's like flossing. With barbed wire, you thought you were doing something normal, maybe even healthy, and suddenly you're trapped in agony with no idea how you got there. Most people who end up hooked on tianeptine didn't set out to become addicts. They weren't chasing a high. They were chasing relief. Maybe they were exhausted from working double shifts and saw a bottle promising energy and focus. Maybe they were dealing with chronic pain or anxiety and couldn't afford a doctor. Maybe they were in recovery from opioids and thought this legal over-the-counter pill would be a safer alternative. Spoiler, it wasn't. The first dose often feels amazing. Users describe a wave of calm, a lifting of mental fog, a sudden ability to function. For someone suffering, whether from depression, withdrawal, or just the grind of modern life, that feeling is seductive, so they take it again and again. And within days or weeks, their brain chemistry has shifted. The euphoria fades, the relief becomes necessity, and suddenly they're not taking tianeptine to feel good, they're taking it to not feel terrible. The typical trajectory looks something like this. Someone walks into a gas station, stressed, exhausted, or in pain. Maybe their back hurts from years of manual labour. Maybe they're working 3 jobs and can barely keep their eyes open. Maybe they just lost their health insurance and can't afford their antidepressant prescription anymore. They're standing at the counter, buying cigarettes or coffee, and they notice a display of colourful bottles with promising labels. Enhanced focus, elevated mood, natural energy. It's right there next to the 5-hour energy shots and diet pills. Looks safe, looks legitimate. The clerk might even recommend it. Yeah, people love those. Say it really helps with energy. Why would the clerk lie? They're just trying to make a sale, and honestly, they probably have no idea what's actually in the bottle. So the person buys one, $10, cheaper than a doctor's. Visit, cheaper than a prescription, cheaper than a therapist. They take it in the parking lot or when they get home or before their next shift, and then it hits. For many people, that first dose feels like the answer they've been searching for. The chronic pain softens, the crushing anxiety lifts, the exhaustion evaporates, replaced by a warm, confident energy. Colours seem brighter, music sounds better, conversations feel easier, For the first time in months, maybe years, they feel okay. Not high, just normal. Like this is how life is supposed to feel, so naturally they take it again the next day. And the day after that. Why wouldn't they? It's legal. It's sold in stores. It's not like they're shooting heroin in an alley. They're taking a supplement, like a multivitamin or a protein shake. They tell themselves it's no different than the millions of Americans taking Prozac or Adderall. They're just managing their health. But within a week, something shifts. The magic starts to fade. The dose that once made them feel amazing now just makes them feel normal. And when they try to skip a dose, they feel terrible, anxious, irritable, physically uncomfortable. So they take another dose, and another. They start carrying the bottle with them everywhere. They take it before work, during lunch, after dinner, before bed. They start buying multiple bottles at a time because running out is unthinkable. This is where the trap closes. They're not taking Tianeptine to feel good anymore. They're taking it to not feel sick. The supplement has become a requirement. Their brain chemistry has been rewired to depend on it. And the worst part, they often don't realize they're addicted. Addiction is for junkies, for people with real drug problems, not for someone who's just taking a legal supplement from the gas station to manage their stress and pain. By the time they admit something is wrong, they're already deep in it. They're spending $50, $100, $200 a week. They're thinking about Tianeptine constantly when they can take their next dose, whether the gas station will be open, whether they can afford another bottle. Their relationships are suffering, their bank account is drained, and they can't stop because stopping means facing withdrawal that feels like dying. This is how it happens, not with a needle in an alley, but with a bottle at a gas station, not with a decision to get high, but with a desperate attempt to feel okay. And by the time they realize they've become addicted to something most people have never heard of, the cage is already locked. It's like trying to clean your armpits with cold soup. Absurd, degrading, and somehow you're stuck doing it anyway because the alternative is worse. Here's a terrifying fact. The therapeutic dose of Tianeptine prescribed in Europe is typically 12.5 to 25 milligrams, taken 2 to 3 times a day. That's the controlled, medically supervised amount. Now look at what's happening in gas stations. Some of these bottles contain 500 to 700 milligrams per serving, 20 to 50 times the therapeutic dose, and people aren't taking one serving, they're taking multiple bottles a day. Why? Because Tianeptine has a short half-life. The effects wear off quickly, sometimes in just a few hours, so users redose constantly, chasing relief, chasing the high, or just trying to stave off withdrawal. This isn't casual use, this is compulsive, uncontrollable dosing driven by neurochemical dependence. And because there's no standardization, no quality control, and no medical oversight, people have no idea how much they're actually taking or what else might be in the bottle. Let's put these numbers in perspective. Imagine you're prescribed a medication, let's say, for blood pressure. Your doctor tells you to take 5 milligrams twice a day. That's the dose that's been studied, tested, and proven safe. Now imagine walking into a gas station and buying a bottle that contains 250 milligrams per capsule, with instructions that say take 1 to 2 as needed. You'd think something was seriously wrong, right? You'd assume it was a mistake, a mislabeling, or maybe a scam. But with Tianeptine, this is standard. Some bottles contain 15 capsules, each loaded with 50 to 70 milligrams of Tianeptine sodium. That's already 3 to 5 times the maximum daily therapeutic dose in a single pill. The label says dietary supplement, so people assume it's safe. They assume someone somewhere did the testing. They assume the FDA approved it, or at least checked it. They assume wrong. And here's where it gets even more dangerous. Tianeptine's half-life is only about 2.5 to 3 hours. That means the drug is metabolized and eliminated from your system rapidly. For a medication, this is actually designed to be helpful. It allows for multiple doses throughout the day to maintain steady therapeutic levels. But for someone taking massive doses seeking euphoria or relief, it means the high crashes fast. Really fast. Users report feeling the effects peak within 30 to 60 minutes, then start to fade within 2 to 3 hours. By hour 4, they're feeling uncomfortable. By hour 6, if they're dependent, they are in withdrawal. So what do? They take more. They redose every few hours all day long, sometimes even setting alarms to wake up in the middle of the night to take another dose just to avoid morning withdrawal. This creates an insane consumption pattern. Someone who starts by taking 1 or 2 capsules a day quickly escalates to 5, 10, 15 capsules. That's multiple bottles daily. Some users report taking 3 to 5 bottles a day just to maintain baseline function, not to get high, just to not be sick. At 50 to 70 milligrams per capsule, that's consuming 3,000 to 5,000 milligrams of tianeptine daily. That's over 100 times the therapeutic dose. It's pharmacological insanity. And the composition of these products? It's all over the map. Some bottles list tianeptine sodium, others use tianeptine sulfate, which has different bioavailability and potency. Some products include tianeptine in a proprietary blend, which means the manufacturer doesn't have to disclose the exact amount. You could be taking 50 milligrams or 500 milligrams, you literally don't know. Testing by independent labs has revealed even more problems. Some products contain significantly less tianeptine than listed on the label. Others contained more. Some were contaminated with other substances, heavy metals, bacterial endotoxins, or unidentified compounds. This is what happens when you bypass pharmaceutical regulations and let supplements be manufactured with essentially no oversight. And the dosing instructions, they're a joke. Take 1 to 2 capsules as needed for mood support. Needed for what? How often? What's the maximum daily dose? What happens if you take too much? The labels don't say, because if they provided actual medical guidance, they'd be admitting it's a drug, not a supplement, and the whole scheme would collapse. So you have people self-dosing with a potent opioid-like substance, taking amounts that would horrify any physician, redosing constantly throughout the day and night with no idea of the actual quantity or purity of what they're consuming. It's a recipe for disaster, addiction, overdose, death. And it's all happening legally, in plain sight at your local gas station. Ever tried to measure medication with a broken scale while blindfolded? That's essentially what tianeptine users are doing, except the consequences are catastrophic. Let's talk about what's actually happening inside your skull when you take tianeptine. When it hits your opioid receptors, it triggers the release of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. This creates that initial wave of pleasure and relaxation, but your brain isn't stupid. It notices the flood of dopamine and starts making adjustments. It downregulates your natural dopamine production and reduces the sensitivity of your receptors. Translation: you need more tianeptine to feel the same effect. This is tolerance, and it builds fast, sometimes within days. At the same time, your brain becomes dependent on tianeptine to maintain baseline function. Without it, your neurochemistry crashes, dopamine plummets, your reward system goes haywire, and you're left feeling anxious, depressed, irritable, and physically ill. This isn't just psychological addiction. This is your brain chemistry being hijacked at the cellular level. To really understand what tianeptine does, we need to zoom in, way in, to the molecular level of your brain. Your neurons, the cells that transmit signals throughout your nervous system, communicate via neurotransmitters. These are chemical messengers that cross the tiny gaps between neurons called synapses and bind to receptors on the receiving neuron. It's like a lock and key system, and your brain has billions of these locks, each responding to specific keys. Opioid receptors, specifically mu-opioid receptors, are among the most important for regulating pain, reward, and emotional state. When your body's natural opioids, called endorphins, bind to these receptors, they create feelings of pleasure and reduce pain. It's your brain's built-in reward system evolved over millions of years to reinforce behaviors that promote survival, eating, socializing, reproduction. Now enter tianeptine. This molecule is shaped in such a way that it fits perfectly into those mu-opioid receptors, just like endorphins do, but with much greater intensity. When tianeptine binds, it activates the receptor, which triggers a cascade of cellular events. The neuron releases dopamine into the synapse, flooding the reward pathways of your brain, particularly the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens regions, heavily involved in pleasure, motivation, and addiction. This dopamine flood is what creates the euphoria, the relaxation, the sense that everything is suddenly okay. But here's where your brain's self-regulation kicks in. Your nervous system is constantly trying to maintain equilibrium, a state called homeostasis. When it detects abnormally high dopamine levels, it responds by reducing sensitivity. It's like your ears adjusting to loud music. The brain turns down the volume to protect itself. This happens in several ways. First, your neurons start producing fewer opioid receptors, a process called downregulation. Fewer receptors mean less response to the same amount of tianeptine. Second, the receptors that remain become less sensitive, requiring more tianeptine to activate them. Third, your brain reduces its own production of endorphins. Why make natural opioids when you're being flooded with synthetic ones? This process happens fast with tianeptine, far faster than with many other substances. Within 3 to 5 days of regular use, tolerance begins to build. The dose that once created euphoria now just makes you feel normal. And this is where the trap tightens. To feel good again, you need more, so you increase your dose. This accelerates the downregulation even further. It's a vicious cycle, and your brain is being rewired with every dose. But it's not just the reward system being affected. Tianeptine also influences glutamate, the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. It modulates AMPA and NMDA receptors, which are involved in learning, memory, and neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to form new neural connections. This may be why tianeptine was originally effective as an antidepressant. It helped the brain adapt and form healthier patterns. But at high doses, this glutamate modulation may contribute to the rapid development of dependence and the severity of withdrawal. Your brain is also adapting at the genetic level. Regular tianeptine use triggers changes in gene expression, the process by which your DNA instructs cells to produce certain proteins. Genes involved in stress response, reward processing, and neurotransmitter production all shift their activity. Some become more active, others shut down. These changes can persist for weeks or even months after you stop taking tianeptine, which is why recovery is so difficult and relapse is so common. And then there's the issue of structural changes. Chronic opioid use, including tianeptine, can actually alter the physical structure of certain brain regions. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and impulse control, shows reduced activity and connectivity. The amygdala, involved in emotion and stress response, becomes hyperactive. These changes make it harder to resist cravings, harder to make rational decisions about quitting, and harder to regulate emotions during withdrawal. So when someone says they're addicted to tianeptine, they're not being dramatic. Their brain has been fundamentally altered. Neurochemically, structurally, and genetically, their nervous system has been rewired to need this substance. Stopping isn't just a matter of willpower. It's asking a chemically dependent brain to function normally without the chemical it now requires. It's like asking a car to run without oil. Sure, you can try, but it's going to be painful, damaging, and possibly catastrophic. If tianeptine's high feels like opioids, its withdrawal feels like opioid withdrawal on steroids. Users describe it as one of the most brutal experiences of their lives. Symptoms kick in within hours of the last dose. sweating, chills, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, muscle aches, restless legs, insomnia, severe anxiety, and crushing depression. Some people report hallucinations, seizures, and suicidal thoughts. The psychological component is equally devastating. Many users describe an overwhelming sense of doom, paranoia, and emotional despair that makes every minute feel like an eternity. And here's the cruel part. Over-the-counter medications barely touch it. Ibuprofen, antihistamines, even kratom, they might dull the edges, but they don't stop the storm. The only thing that truly relieves tianeptine withdrawal is more tianeptine, or actual opioids. This creates a vicious cycle where people can't quit even when they desperately want to. Let's walk through what happens when someone who's been taking high doses of tianeptine decides, or is forced, to stop. The timeline is brutal and unforgiving. Within 4 to 6 hours after the last dose, the first symptoms appear. It starts subtly. A creeping anxiety, a slight restlessness, maybe some yawning and watery eyes. You might mistake it for being tired or coming down with something. But if you're experienced with tianeptine withdrawal, you know exactly what's coming, and the dread itself makes it worse. By hour 8 to 12, the symptoms intensify dramatically. Your skin starts to crawl, not figuratively, you literally feel like insects are moving under your skin. Your legs become restless, unable to stay still, a condition called akathisia that's common in opioid withdrawal. You can't sit, can't lie down, can't get comfortable. You pace around your room like a caged animal, desperate for relief that won't come. The nausea hits next, waves of it, accompanied by cold sweats and hot flashes. Your body can't regulate its temperature. 1 minute you're freezing, piling on blankets. The next you're drenched in sweat, stripping everything off. Your muscles start to ache, a deep, bone-deep pain that radiates through your back, legs, and arms. It feels like the worst flu you've ever had, multiplied by 10. Your digestive system rebels. Diarrhea comes in waves, sometimes lasting hours. You're running to the bathroom constantly, your body purging itself, trying to reset. Vomiting often accompanies this, leaving you weak, dehydrated, and unable to keep down food or even water. Some people lose 10 to 15 pounds in just the first few days of withdrawal. Sleep becomes impossible. Your brain is in chaos, neurotransmitters firing erratically, and your body won't let you rest. When you do manage to doze off for a few minutes, you're jolted awake by muscle spasms or nightmares so vivid they feel real. Time stretches. An hour feels like a day feels like a week. You watch the clock obsessively, counting down minutes, wondering if you'll survive this. The psychological symptoms are often worse than the physical ones. A profound, crushing depression settles in, not the kind where you feel sad, but the kind where you feel nothing, empty, hollow. Like all the colour has been drained from the world. Many users describe it as existential despair, a sense that life has no meaning and never will again. This is anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure, and it's terrifying. Anxiety spirals into panic. Your heart races. Your thoughts race. You're convinced something terrible is happening, that you're dying, that you've permanently damaged your brain. Some people experience paranoia, believing others are judging them, watching them, plotting against them. A few report full-blown hallucinations, shadows moving in their peripheral vision, voices that aren't there, a sense of impending doom so intense it's almost physical. And this isn't a 2-day ordeal. The acute withdrawal, the worst of the physical symptoms, can last 5 to 7 days, sometimes longer depending on the duration and intensity of use. But even after the acute phase passes, the psychological symptoms linger. Post-acute withdrawal syndrome, or PAWS, can persist for weeks or months. Depression, anxiety, Sleep disturbances and cravings continue long after the physical symptoms have resolved. Here's the cruelest twist. Most medications that help with opioid withdrawal don't work as well with tianeptine. Clonidine can help with some autonomic symptoms like sweating and restlessness. Gabapentin might take the edge off the anxiety and muscle pain. Benzodiazepines can help with sleep, but they're addictive themselves and dangerous if overused. Nothing fully stops the storm. Nothing except more tianeptine or switching to another opioid like buprenorphine, which just trades one dependency for another. So people suffer through withdrawal alone, in their bedrooms, their bathrooms, their cars, wherever they can hide from the world while their body tears itself apart. And many don't make it. They relapse within hours or days, not because they're weak, but because the withdrawal is genuinely unbearable. It's like being told to hold your breath until you pass out. Eventually, your body overrides your willpower and forces you to breathe. With tianeptine withdrawal, eventually your brain overrides your resolve and forces you to dose. It's not a moral failing, it's biology. Imagine showing up to an emergency room in the throes of tianeptine withdrawal. You're shaking, vomiting, delirious with anxiety. You tell the doctor you're withdrawing from tianeptine, and they stare at you blankly. Because most ER doctors have never heard of it. It's not in their textbooks. It's not on their radar. They might treat you for opioid withdrawal, but tianeptine's pharmacology is weird. It doesn't show up on standard drug tests, and it doesn't respond to all the same treatments. Some hospitals have tried using buprenorphine or methadone to ease symptoms, with mixed results. Others send people home with anti-nausea meds and a shrug. The medical system is playing catch-up, and people are suffering in the gap. The disconnect between what's happening in gas stations and what's happening in hospitals is staggering. Emergency medicine operates on protocols, standardized approaches to common problems. When someone comes in with opioid withdrawal, there's a playbook. Assess vital signs. Administer clonidine for autonomic symptoms. Possibly start buprenorphine if the patient is in moderate withdrawal, provide anti-nausea medication, ensure hydration, and either admit for monitoring or discharge with referrals to addiction treatment. But tianeptine doesn't fit the playbook. It's too new, too obscure, too unregulated. Most medical schools don't teach about it. Most residency programs haven't seen cases yet. And the medical literature is sparse. A handful of case reports from France, a few studies from Eastern Europe, and a growing collection of American case reports documenting this strange new addiction. So when a patient walks into the ER and says, "I'm addicted to tianeptine," the first problem is recognition. The triage nurse might not know how to spell it. The attending physician might have to Google it in the middle of the shift. The toxicology service, if consulted, might not have seen a case before. Everyone starting from scratch, trying to piece together what's happening while the patient suffers. Standard urine drug screens won't detect tianeptine. They're designed to look for common drugs of abuse. Opioids like morphine and oxycodone, benzodiazepines, amphetamines, cocaine, THC. Tianeptine's chemical structure is different enough that it doesn't trigger these tests. So the patient might say they're withdrawing from an opioid-like substance, but the drug screen comes back negative. This creates confusion and sometimes skepticism. Is the patient telling the truth? Are they drug-seeking? Are they exaggerating? Some well-meaning doctors, not understanding tianeptine's unique pharmacology, might treat it like a typical opioid withdrawal. They might offer buprenorphine, the medication commonly used for opioid addiction treatment, and sometimes this helps. Buprenorphine is a partial opioid agonist that binds to the same mu opioid receptors tianeptine targets, potentially easing withdrawal symptoms. But it's not a perfect solution. Some patients report that buprenorphine helps significantly, others say it barely touches their tianeptine withdrawal. The research just isn't there yet to know why or to predict who will respond. Other hospitals might be more cautious or simply unfamiliar with using buprenorphine in this context. They might offer only supportive care, IV fluids for dehydration, ondansetron for nausea, ibuprofen for muscle aches. The patient is sent home with instructions to ride it out, and maybe a referral to an addiction specialist who might not have availability for weeks. And then there's the stigma. Even in a medical setting, addiction carries judgment. Some healthcare workers, consciously or unconsciously, view addiction as a moral failing rather than a medical condition. When the substance is something they've never heard of, something from a gas station, the judgment can intensify. You got addicted to what? Pills from a Chevron? Why would you take something like that? The patient, already in crisis, now feels shame on top of physical and psychological agony. Insurance is another barrier. Some insurance companies won't cover treatment for Tianeptine addiction because it's not a recognized diagnosis in their systems. It's not in the DSM-5 as a specific substance use disorder. So claims get denied. Patients who need inpatient detox or residential treatment are told it's not covered. They're left to detox at home, unsupervised, at risk for complications. The few addiction medicine specialists who have treated Tianeptine withdrawal are learning on the fly, sharing notes at conferences and in online forums. Some have found success with gabapentin to reduce anxiety and muscle pain. Others use clonidine to control blood pressure and autonomic symptoms. Some have experimented with using long-acting opioids to taper patients down gradually. But there's no consensus, no established protocol, no FDA-approved treatment for Tianeptine use disorder. Every case is trial and error. And while the medical community slowly figures it out, people are showing up to ERs across the country, desperate for help and leaving without real answers. Some come back repeatedly, caught in a cycle of attempting to quit, withdrawing, going to the hospital, getting minimal relief and relapsing. It's medical whack-a-mole, treating the same patients over and over because the system doesn't have the tools to actually break the cycle. It's like trying to perform surgery with a butter knife and a prayer. Technically you're trying to help, but you don't have what you need to actually fix the problem. Tianeptine addiction doesn't just destroy your health, it destroys your bank account. Because tolerance builds so quickly, users often find themselves taking multiple bottles a day just to function. At $10 to $15 per bottle, that's $50 to $100 a day. Some people report spending $300 to $500 a week. That's $1,200 to $2,000 a month on gas station pills. Jobs are lost, savings are drained, credit cards are maxed. People steal from family, pawn valuables, and spiral into financial ruin, all for a substance they can legally buy next to the Doritos. Let's run the numbers, because the financial devastation is almost as brutal as the physical addiction. Imagine you start taking Tianeptine casually. 1 bottle a day, $10. That's $70 a week, about $300 a month. Expensive, but manageable if you're working. It's like adding a car payment to your budget. Annoying, but doable. But tolerance builds fast. Within 2 weeks, 1 bottle doesn't cut it anymore. You need 2. Now you're at $600 a month. That's a rent payment in many parts of the country. Your budget starts to feel tight. You cut back on other things, eating out, entertainment. Maybe you skip a bill or two, telling yourself you'll catch up next month. By week 4, you're up to 3 bottles a day. $900 a month. Your savings account, if you had one, is drained. Credit. Cards start coming out. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll quit soon, that you just need to get through this rough patch. But the rough patch never ends because you're physically dependent now. Quitting isn't an option, not without help you can't afford and don't know how to access. 2 months in, you're taking 4 to 5 bottles daily. $1,200 to $1,500 a month. More than most people's rent. You've maxed out 1 credit card. You're borrowing money from family, making up excuses, car repairs, medical bills, anything but the truth. You start selling things, your laptop, your gaming console, jewelry, tools. Anything with resale value gets pawned or listed online. You tell yourself you'll buy it back later. You won't. 3 months in, you're at 6 bottles a day, sometimes more. $1,800 a month, $21,000 a year. You've lost track of your finances because looking at the numbers triggers so much shame and panic you can't handle it. Bills go unpaid. Your phone gets shut off. Your car insurance lapses. Eviction notices arrive. You're drowning, and Tianeptine is the anchor around your neck, dragging you deeper. Some people keep jobs through sheer force of will, dosing in bathrooms, taking emergency breaks to run to the gas station, living in constant fear someone will notice. Others lose their jobs, too many absences, declining performance, or getting caught stealing from the register to fund the habit. Once the job is gone, the financial spiral accelerates. Unemployment or disability checks, if they come at all, barely cover the Tianeptine habit, let alone food or rent. Relationships implode. Partners discover the financial devastation, empty joint accounts, secret credit cards, loans taken out without permission. Families who loaned money realize it's never coming back. Trust evaporates. Some partners leave. Others stay but become financial controllers, monitoring every purchase, which only drives the addiction deeper underground. Criminal behavior becomes common, not because Tianeptine users are bad people, but because desperation overrides morality. People shoplift bottles from gas stations, not easy when you need 6 a day and clerks are watching. They steal from family members, taking cash from wallets, pawning heirloom jewellery. Some commit fraud, opening credit cards in other people's names, writing bad checks, anything to get the money for the next dose. And here's the impossible math. Even if you want to get help, you can't afford it. Medical detox costs thousands of dollars. Residential treatment is tens of thousands. Outpatient therapy requires insurance and transportation, all of which is impossible when you're spending every dollar on Tianeptine just to avoid withdrawal. You're trapped in a financial cage, and the key costs money you don't have. Some users try to quit cold turkey to save money, but the withdrawal is so unbearable they relapse within hours or days, often taking an even higher dose to compensate, which makes the habit more expensive. It's a financial feedback loop with no exit. The more you spend, the less you can afford to quit. The less you can afford to quit, the more you spend. And all of it is happening for a substance that's legally sold, casually stocked, and cheap enough that it looks affordable until suddenly it's consuming your entire existence. It's like trying to fill a bottomless pit with dollar bills. You keep throwing money in, and it just keeps disappearing into the void. Walk into most gas stations selling Tianeptine, and you'll find the staff have no idea what it does. They just know it sells. Fast. Bottles fly off the shelves, often purchased by the same customers multiple times a day. Some store owners have started keeping it behind the counter, not because it's illegal, but because people steal it. Others have stopped selling it after witnessing the human toll, customers growing visibly sicker, more desperate, more hollow-eyed with each visit. But plenty of stores keep stocking it. Why? Because it's legal and it's profitable, and in a legal grey zone, profit often wins. Let's talk about the gas station owners and clerks who are on the front lines of this crisis, often without realising it. Most are small business owners, franchisees, or employees just trying to make a living. They stock their shelves with products from distributors who promise these items will sell. And Tianeptine? It definitely sells. At first it seems like any other supplement. A distributor shows up with glossy sales materials, shows them the profit margins, buy for $2 wholesale, sell for $12 retail, and the owner thinks, why not? It's legal. It's packaged professionally. It looks like the energy shots and diet pills they already sell. So they stock a case, put it near the register and wait. Within days, the bottles are gone. Customers come in asking for it by name. You got Zaza? Do you carry Tiana? The owner restocks. The bottles vanish again. It becomes one of their best-selling products, sometimes rivaling cigarettes or lottery tickets in terms of profit margin and turnover. For a struggling business in a low-income area, this is a miracle product. They don't ask questions. Why would they? But then they start to notice patterns. The same customers coming in 3, 4, 5 times a day. People who look increasingly unhealthy. Weight loss, shaking hands, desperation in their eyes. Customers who used to be friendly and chatty now barely make eye contact, just grab the bottles and leave. Some buy out the entire stock, then come back an hour later, asking when the next shipment arrives. Some customers start getting aggressive when the product is out of stock. When will you have more? Can you call other stores for me? I need it now. The desperation is palpable. Clerks, untrained in addiction medicine, don't know what to make of it. They might joke about it with co-workers. That Zaza stuff is crazy, people love it. They don't realise they're watching addiction in real time. Some store owners do eventually realise something's wrong. They notice the same people coming in looking sicker, more desperate, spending money they clearly don't have. They hear stories, customers admitting they're addicted, begging the clerk not to sell them more. Families coming in, asking the owner to please stop selling it to their son, their daughter, their spouse. These moments create moral dilemmas. A few owners make the ethical choice. They pull Tianeptine from their shelves voluntarily, even though it cost them money. They put up signs. We no longer carry these products. They direct customers to addiction resources. But they're in the minority. Most keep selling because legally they can. And economically they feel they have to. Small businesses operate on thin margins. Losing a profitable product line can mean the difference between staying open and closing down. Then, there are the corporate chains, large gas station franchises, truck stop chains, convenience store corporations. They have policies, legal departments, risk management teams. When Tianeptine starts making headlines, when lawsuits are threatened, some issue directives to remove it. Others don't. The decision is made in boardrooms far from the actual stores, based on legal liability and profit projections, not human impact. And the distributors? They're making millions. They know exactly what they're selling and to whom. They're not naive. When a product has this kind of repeat customer rate, when stores can't keep it in stock, when the same people are buying multiple bottles daily, but as long as it's legal, they keep manufacturing, keep distributing, keep collecting checks. Some states have started holding retailers accountable. In Alabama, after Tianeptine was banned, some stores were raided and owners were charged with selling a controlled substance. The fines were steep. The message was clear. But in states where it's still legal, retailers face no consequences. They're just business people selling a legal product. The fact that the product is destroying lives isn't their responsibility, or so the logic goes. There's a dark irony here. The same gas stations that post signs saying we card for cigarettes and alcohol, that refuse to sell cold medicine to people without ID because of meth concerns, are freely selling a substance that's arguably more addictive and dangerous than many controlled substances. No age verification, no purchase limits, no warnings, just a barcode scan and a transaction. Some clerks do try to help. They warn customers, especially young people, that stuff is really addictive, right? Sometimes customers listen. More often they don't, or they already know and don't care because they're already hooked. The clerk rings up the sale, hands over the bottle, and watches another person walk out the door toward a future they can't see coming. It's like being a lifeguard, watching someone swim toward a riptide, shouting warnings they can't hear, unable to leave your post to save them. You're complicit, but you're also powerless. And the next customer is already at the register asking for the same thing. Poison control centres have watched Tianeptine-related calls skyrocket in recent years. People call in panicked after taking too much, after mixing it with other substances, or after experiencing severe side effects like seizures or heart palpitations. The data is grim. Between 2014 and 2022, Tianeptine exposure cases reported to US poison control centers increased by over 1,500%. These aren't recreational drug users. These are regular people who thought they were buying a legal supplement and ended up in medical crisis. The poison control operators sit at their desks, headsets on, ready to help people who've accidentally ingested household cleaners, overdosed on medications, or been bitten by spiders. They're trained to handle thousands of different toxic exposures, armed with databases and protocols for almost every imaginable substance. But then the Tianeptine calls started coming in, and nobody knew what to do. The first few calls, back around 2015 or 16, were isolated incidents. I took some supplement called Tianeptine, and now I feel really strange. The operators would look it up, find minimal information, maybe see that it was used as an antidepressant in Europe, and give general advice, monitor symptoms, go to the ER if they worsen, call back if anything changes. The calls were odd but manageable. Then the trickle became a stream. By 2018, multiple calls were coming in weekly. By 2020, it was daily, and the cases were getting worse. People weren't just feeling strange, they were experiencing cardiac arrhythmias, respiratory depression, loss of consciousness, seizures. Some callers were in full-blown overdose, barely coherent, while a panicked friend or family member held the phone. The typical scenario went like this. Someone takes Tianeptine as directed, or maybe a bit more than directed, trying to enhance the effects. They're expecting energy and focus. Instead, they get intense sedation, difficulty breathing, and a racing heart. They panic. They call poison control. The operator asks what they took, how much, and when. The person often can't give precise answers because the labels are vague and they weren't paying attention. I took like 4 or 5 pills. I don't know, maybe 6. The operator needs to assess toxicity, but without knowing the exact dose, it's guesswork. Some calls involve polydrug use, Tianeptine mixed with alcohol, benzodiazepines, or actual opioids. This is when things get truly dangerous. All these substances depress the central nervous system, and together they can cause respiratory failure. The caller is slurring, their words struggling to stay awake, and the operator is trying to keep them conscious while emergency services are dispatched. These calls often end with an ambulance ride and days in the ICU. Then there are the withdrawal calls. These started increasing around 2019. People who'd been taking Tianeptine regularly, sometimes for months, suddenly can't get it. The gas station is out of stock. They ran out of money or they're trying to quit. Within hours, they're in acute withdrawal, and it's so severe they think they're dying. They call poison control in terror. I stopped taking Tianeptine and now I can't stop vomiting. I'm shaking uncontrollably, and I feel like I'm having a heart attack. These calls are heartbreaking because the operators can't offer much help. There's no antidote for Tianeptine withdrawal. They can't reverse it, like they can with opioid overdoses using naloxone. They can only recommend going to the emergency room, staying hydrated and seeking addiction treatment. Advice that feels painfully inadequate when someone is suffering through what they describe as the worst experience of their life. Poison control centers started tracking Tianeptine as a specific substance around 2016. The National Poison Data System, which aggregates reports from centers across the country, began seeing exponential growth. In 2014, there were fewer than 20 reported exposures. By 2017, it was in the hundreds. By 2021, over 1,000 cases were reported in a single year. And those are just the cases where someone actually called poison control the tip of the iceberg. The demographics of callers are revealing. They're not primarily teenagers or young adults looking to get high, though there are some of those. Many are middle-aged adults, both men and women, from rural and suburban areas. They're people with jobs, families, responsibilities. They took Tianeptine for pain, for depression, for energy, legitimate reasons, and got trapped. When they call poison control, they're often embarrassed, ashamed, and confused about how this happened to them. Some calls are from medical professionals, ER doctors or paramedics who've encountered a Tianeptine case and need guidance. We've got a 28-year-old male, altered mental status, respiratory depression, says he took something called Tianeptine. What are we dealing with here? The poison control specialists consult their databases, reach out to toxicologists, and piece together recommendations, support the airway and breathing, monitor cardiac function, consider activated charcoal if the ingestion was recent, treat symptomatically. It's all reactive because there's no established protocol. The centres also field calls from frantic family members who found their loved one unconscious with empty Tianeptine bottles nearby. These callers are sometimes hysterical, and the operators have to stay calm while getting information and coordinating emergency response. Is he breathing? Can you feel a pulse? I need you to stay on the line with me while we get help there. These are life or death moments happening because of a supplement sold next to beef jerky. Poison control centres have tried to sound the alarm. They've published case series in medical journals, presented data at toxicology conferences, and communicated with the FDA and DEA. They've documented deaths, permanent injuries, and patterns of abuse. But the regulatory response has been slow. Meanwhile, the calls keep coming, the numbers keep rising, and the operators keep fielding emergencies that shouldn't exist. It's like being a firefighter in a town where someone keeps setting buildings on fire legally, and all you can do is show up with a hose while the arsonist walks free, preparing the next blaze. Tianeptine has its own dark corner of the internet. Reddit forums, Discord servers, and Facebook groups are filled with people sharing dosing strategies, withdrawal horror stories, and desperate pleas for help. Some threads read like support groups, others read like cautionary tales. You'll find posts from people who started taking Tianeptine to cope with chronic pain or anxiety, only to find themselves physically dependent within weeks. You'll see photos of people's stockpiles, dozens of bottles lined up like trophies or prison bars, depending on how you look at it. And you'll see the questions repeated over and over. How do I stop? Can I taper? Will I ever feel normal again? Log on to Reddit and search for Tianeptine. You'll find multiple subreddits dedicated entirely to this substance. r/quitting. Tianeptine is one of the largest, with thousands of members, a support community for people trying to escape addiction. The posts are raw, unfiltered, and often heartbreaking. People share their day one-quit attempts with a mix of determination and terror. They document their withdrawal hour by hour. Hour 12. Threw up 6 times. Can't stop shaking, legs won't stay still. Others respond with encouragement, advice and solidarity. Then there are the relapse posts. I made it 5 days and caved. I feel like such a failure. The community rallies around them, reminding them that addiction is a disease, not a moral failing, that setbacks are part of recovery, that they can try again. It's genuinely touching, strangers offering compassion and support to people who often feel completely alone in their struggle. But scroll through other Tianeptine communities and you'll find something darker. Some forums are essentially user guides for addiction. People share where to buy the cheapest bottles, which brands are most potent, how to potentiate the effects by mixing Tianeptine with other substances. There are detailed discussions of dosing schedules, how to space out doses to maximize the high while minimizing tolerance, or so they claim. It's harm reduction mixed with harm perpetuation, a community bound together by shared addiction. The stockpile photos are particularly haunting. Users post pictures of their collections, 50, 100, sometimes 200 bottles of Tianeptine lined up on shelves, in closets, under beds. Some do it as a form of accountability. This is how bad it's gotten. I need to stop. Others seem almost proud, displaying their supply like preppers showing off canned goods. The comments range from shock to envy to warnings. Please get help before it's too late. Some users share their financial ruin in spreadsheet form. They've tracked every purchase, every dollar spent, and the totals are staggering. I've spent $37,000 on Tianeptine in 2 years. The community responds with a mix of horror and recognition. Many are in similar situations, they just haven't done the math, because looking at the numbers is too painful. The taper threads are both hopeful and tragic. People devise elaborate tapering schedules, reducing their dose by tiny increments each day, trying to avoid the brutal withdrawal. They post updates. Day 3 of taper, dropped from 2 grams to 1.8 grams, feeling shaky but manageable. But more often than not, the taper fails. Someone will post a week later, the withdrawal hits too hard, back to full dose, hate myself. The community tries to keep them motivated, but the reality is that Tianeptine tapers rarely work without medical support, and most people don't have access to that support. YouTube has Tianeptine content too, video testimonials from people sharing their addiction stories, warnings to others, and documentation of their quit attempts. Some channels follow individuals through withdrawal in real time. You watch them on day 1, relatively composed but anxious. By day 3, they're barely functional, pale, shaking, eyes hollow, voice cracking. Some make it through and post triumphant 1-month clean videos. Others disappear from the platform entirely and you're left, wondering if they relapsed, gave up, or worse. TikTok has become a surprisingly active platform for Tianeptine awareness, particularly among younger users. Short videos show empty bottles, warn about the dangers, or document withdrawal symptoms. Some are educational, others are sensationalized. The comment sections are telling, a mix of people who've never heard of Tianeptine, people warning others away from it, and people admitting they're currently struggling with addiction. Watching this while on my way to get more, one comment reads, "I know I need to stop, but I can't." Facebook groups tend to skew older and more regional, often organised by state or city. Tennessee Tianeptine Awareness, Alabama Zaza Survivors. Groups like these serve as local support networks. Members share which gas stations still sell it, which emergency rooms are familiar with Tianeptine withdrawal, and which addiction counsellors understand what they're going through. They organise meetups, sometimes in parking, lots or coffee shops, where people going through the same nightmare can support each other in person. But social media also spreads misinformation. Some posts claim you can beat Tianeptine withdrawal with high doses of vitamin C and magnesium. Others suggest kratom as a perfect substitute, failing to mention that kratom has its own addiction potential. Some users sell miracle taper kits or detox supplements that promise easy withdrawal, scams preying on desperate people. The moderators of legitimate recovery communities try to combat this, but misinformation spreads faster than truth. Perhaps most disturbing are the vendor promotions. Despite platform policies against selling drugs, some Facebook and Instagram accounts openly advertise Tianeptine for sale, using coded language or claiming it's for research purposes only. They have professional-looking graphics, testimonials and links to purchase. It's direct-to-consumer drug dealing happening in plain sight on mainstream social media platforms that claim to have safety policies. The social media ecosystem around Tianeptine is a microcosm of the crisis itself, a mix of genuine community support, shared trauma, enabling behaviour, exploitation, and desperate people searching for answers in a landscape that offers more questions than solutions. It's like watching a slow-motion car crash in a hall of mirrors. You see the disaster from every angle, distorted and multiplied, but somehow you can't look away and you can't stop it from happening. One of the most disturbing trends is Tianeptine use among teenagers and young adults. Because it's sold legally and looks like a supplement, young people don't perceive it as dangerous. It's not heroin. It's not fentanyl. It's just a bottle from the gas station. But the consequences are the same. High school students have been hospitalized. College kids have dropped out. Some have died. Parents are blindsided, discovering their child's addiction to a substance they've never heard of, purchased from a place they thought was safe. Meet 17-year-old Tyler. He's a high school senior, plays varsity soccer, gets decent grades, has a girlfriend and plans to go to community college next year. Like a lot of teenagers, he's stressed. There's pressure from his parents, from coaches, from teachers. He works part-time at a fast food place to save money for a car. He's exhausted, anxious, and looking for something to help him keep up. One day after soccer practice, Tyler stops at the gas station for a Gatorade. At the counter, he notices small bottles with names like Energy Plus and Mental Focus. The label mentions natural ingredients, cognitive support, and mood enhancement. Tyler thinks about the upcoming exams, the double shift he has tomorrow, the game on Friday. He asks the clerk about it. The clerk shrugs. Yeah, people say it works pretty good. Gives you energy. Tyler buys one for $10. He takes it in his car before heading home. Within 30 minutes, something shifts. His anxiety melts away. The exhaustion lifts. He feels confident, capable, like he can handle anything. The stress that's been crushing him for months suddenly seems manageable. He goes home, finishes his homework easily, helps his mum with dinner, and goes to bed feeling better than he has in a long time. The next day he takes another one. Same result. By the end of the week, he's taking it daily. By the end of the month, he's taking 2 or 3 bottles a day. His parents notice he's going through money quickly but assume it's gas and food. Tyler tells himself it's fine, it's legal, it's sold in stores, and it's helping him function. He doesn't realize he's physically dependent until he runs out of money and can't buy more. The withdrawal hits him at school. During third period, he starts sweating profusely. His stomach cramps. He feels overwhelmingly anxious, like something terrible is about to happen. By lunch, he's in the bathroom, vomiting, shaking, unable to focus on anything except the desperate need to get more Tianeptine. He leaves school early, makes up an excuse about feeling sick, and uses the last of his money to buy 2 bottles. The relief is immediate and terrifying. Tyler realizes he's trapped. He can't tell his parents. They'd be furious, disappointed, confused. He can't tell his friends. They think he's weak or stupid. He starts stealing money from his mum's purse, from his dad's wallet. Small amounts they hopefully won't notice. He starts skipping work shifts because he's either high and can't function, or in withdrawal and can't leave the house. His grades drop. He quits the soccer team. His girlfriend breaks up with him because he's become distant and secretive. His parents know something's wrong but can't figure out what. They suspect marijuana or alcohol. They search his room and find dozens of empty Tianeptine bottles in his backpack and under his bed. They've never heard of it. They Google it. What they find terrifies them. They confront Tyler, who breaks down crying, admitting he's addicted but doesn't know how to stop. They take him to their family doctor, who's also never heard of Tianeptine. The doctor Googles it during the appointment, reads for a few minutes and suggests trying to taper off slowly while seeing a therapist. Tyler tries. He can't do it. The withdrawal is unbearable without medical support, and the doctor doesn't know how to provide it because there's no established protocol for Tianeptine in adolescence. Tyler's story is not unique. Across the country, teenagers are stumbling into Tianeptine addiction the same way. Curiosity, stress relief, peer influence, or just bad luck. Some bought it themselves. Others got it from older siblings or friends who swore it was harmless. Some were even given it by well-meaning adults who thought they were helping the kid with their anxiety or depression. The impact on education is severe. Students who become addicted often see their academic performance collapse. They miss classes during withdrawal. They can't concentrate when they're high. Their future plans, college, trade school, military, work, all become secondary to the immediate need to avoid withdrawal. Some drop out entirely. College students face similar trajectories, but with additional complications. Many are away from home for the first time, without parental oversight, with easy access to gas stations and convenience stores near campus. They're dealing with academic pressure, social stress, and often experimenting with their identity and independence. Tianeptine can seem like a solution, legal, accessible, and effective at reducing anxiety and boosting focus for studying. But college kids often have higher disposable incomes from student loans, part-time jobs, or parental support. This means they can afford larger habits faster. Some students have reported spending their entire semester's living expenses on Tianeptine within weeks, then being unable to pay for rent, food, or textbooks. They start failing classes not because they can't do the work, but because they're either high, in withdrawal, or obsessed with getting their next dose. These social consequences are devastating. Friendships dissolve. Romantic relationships implode. Roommates become concerned or angry about the behavior changes and constant gas station runs. Some students get kicked out of dorms or apartments. Others isolate completely, spending all their time alone, dosing and redosing, scrolling through Tianeptine forums, and watching their college experience slip away. Parents often don't find out until it's too late, until their child is in crisis, until they failed out of school, until they're in the hospital or asking for thousands of dollars to pay off debts they can't explain. The conversation is brutal. I'm addicted to something called Tianeptine. I bought it at the gas station. I need help. Parents are shocked, confused, and often angry, not at their child, but at a system that allowed this to happen. Some families seek treatment immediately. They research rehab facilities, make calls, and discover that most programs aren't equipped to handle Tianeptine addiction. The intake coordinators have never heard of it. The clinical staff doesn't know how to manage withdrawal. Insurance won't cover it because it's not a recognized substance use disorder. The family's left scrambling, trying to find anyone who can help, while their teenager suffers. And here's the cruelest irony. These kids didn't set out to become addicts. They weren't looking to get high. They were looking for help with stress, anxiety, depression, exhaustion, the overwhelming pressure of modern adolescence. They found a product marketed as a solution, sold legally, easily accessible. They trusted that if it was dangerous, it wouldn't be on store shelves. They were wrong. And now they're paying the price for a regulatory failure that should have never allowed Tianeptine to reach them in the first place. It's like handing teenagers a loaded gun disguised as a toy and then acting surprised when someone gets hurt. A handful of states have started banning Tianeptine outright. Michigan, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Kentucky, and Minnesota have classified it as a controlled substance, making it illegal to sell or possess without a prescription. Other states are considering similar legislation, but the process is slow, and in the meantime, people are still suffering. Federal action has been limited. The FDA has issued warnings and seized some shipments, but Tianeptine remains legal in most of the country. And even in states where it's banned, people are ordering it online or crossing state lines to buy it. Let's look at how the legislative process actually works, or doesn't work. State governments operate on cycles. Legislatures typically meet for a few months each year, sometimes less. Getting a bill introduced, debated, and passed requires political will, evidence, and often personal stories that make the issue real to lawmakers. For Tianeptine, this process has been frustratingly slow. Alabama was one of the first states to act, and their path illustrates the challenges. Around 2018, emergency rooms in Alabama started seeing a spike in Tianeptine-related cases. Poison control calls increased. Families began reaching out to local news stations with stories of addiction and loss. A few state legislators heard from constituents whose children had become addicted. The evidence was mounting, but it took time to build momentum. In 2020, Alabama's legislature introduced a bill to classify tianeptine as a Schedule II controlled substance, the same category as oxycodone and fentanyl. This wasn't a casual decision. Schedule II classification means serious criminal penalties for possession and sale. The bill's sponsors had to demonstrate that tianeptine had high abuse potential, no accepted medical use in the United States, and posed a significant public health threat. The pharmaceutical companies and supplement manufacturers didn't take this lying down. They hired lobbyists who argued that tianeptine was a legitimate supplement, that banning it would set a dangerous precedent for the entire supplement industry, and that the state was overreaching. They presented their own studies, often from the European medical literature, showing tianeptine's legitimate use as an antidepressant, conveniently ignoring that the doses being sold in gas stations were astronomically higher than therapeutic doses. The debate in the Alabama legislature was contentious. Some lawmakers sided with the supplement industry, arguing for personal freedom and business rights. Others heard testimony from emergency room doctors, addiction specialists, and families who'd lost loved ones. One particularly powerful testimony came from a mother whose 19-year-old son had died from tianeptine toxicity combined with other substances. She held up a photo of her son and asked the legislators point blank, "How many more kids have to die before you act?" The bill passed in May 2021. Alabama classified tianeptine as a Schedule II controlled substance, making it illegal to sell, possess, or distribute without a valid prescription. Gas stations and smoke shops had 30 days to remove it from shelves. Law enforcement began conducting sweeps, and several retailers were charged with selling a controlled substance. But victory in one state doesn't mean nationwide change. Each state has to go through its own legislative process. Tennessee followed Alabama's lead in 2022 after documenting hundreds of tianeptine-related emergency room visits. Michigan passed similar legislation in 2023. Georgia, Kentucky, and Minnesota have followed suit. But that's only 6 states out of 50. In the other 44, tianeptine remains legal, and even in banned states, enforcement is complicated. Some retailers initially complied, pulling tianeptine from shelves. Others tried to skirt the law by reformulating products, changing brand names, or claiming the products were not for human consumption and selling them anyway. Law enforcement has had to play whack-a-mole, conducting undercover buys and raids to catch violators. Meanwhile, the online market remains largely unregulated. Federal law doesn't prohibit tianeptine, so websites based in states where it's legal can ship to customers in banned states. Some sites don't even ask for a shipping address until checkout, making it easy to circumvent state restrictions. Law enforcement in banned states can't effectively monitor and intercept every package, so the black market thrives. At the federal level, the FDA has taken some action. They've issued warning letters to manufacturers making unsubstantiated medical claims. They've seized imports at the border. They've published consumer advisories. But they haven't pursued full-scale criminalization through the DEA's controlled substance scheduling process. Why? Several reasons. First, federal scheduling is a lengthy process requiring extensive review by the DEA, FDA, and Department of Health and Human Services. Second, there's concern about setting precedents. If tianeptine is scheduled, what about the hundreds of other unregulated supplements with abuse potential? Third, there's political pressure from the supplement industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar business with significant lobbying power. Some lawmakers have introduced federal bills to ban tianeptine nationwide. These bills typically die in committee, never making it to a full vote. The political will isn't there yet, and the issue isn't high-profile enough to generate sustained public pressure. Tianeptine doesn't generate the same headlines as fentanyl or methamphetamine. It's too new, too obscure, too easy for the public to dismiss as just a supplement problem. Advocacy groups are trying to change this. Organisations like the National Safety Council and community-based addiction advocates are pushing for federal action. They're documenting cases, presenting data to legislators, and organising awareness campaigns. But these groups are often under-resourced and competing for attention with larger, more established drug policy issues. So the patchwork continues. If you live in Alabama, you can't legally buy Tianeptine. But drive 2 hours north to Tennessee, and until recently, you could stock up. Now Tennessee's banned it too, but drive west to Mississippi, and it's still on the shelves. This patchwork creates problems, not just for regulation, but for treatment. A person in Alabama might get arrested for possession of Tianeptine, while a person in Mississippi can buy it legally and consume it without consequence. The inconsistency is absurd and harmful, and even successful state bans don't solve the underlying problem. They don't provide treatment resources for people already addicted. They don't educate the public about the dangers. They don't address the reasons people turn to Tianeptine in the first place: lack of access to mental health care, untreated chronic pain, economic desperation. They just move the problem around like trying to sweep water uphill. It might look like you're making progress, but the water's still there, just pooling somewhere else. If you can't find Tianeptine at your local gas station, don't worry. Amazon, eBay, and countless supplement websites will happily ship it to your door. Online sellers use the same vague marketing language: mood support, cognitive enhancement, stress relief. Reviews are chilling. 5-star ratings from people saying it changed their life or saved them from depression. 1-star ratings from people warning it ruined their life or is impossible to quit. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. Type Tianeptine into Amazon's search bar, or at least you could until recently. For years, dozens of products were available with prime shipping. Bottles of Tianeptine sodium or Tianeptine sulfate powder, capsules, or tablets, all marketed as dietary supplements or nootropics. The product listings were professional, complete with ingredient lists, dosage recommendations, and customer reviews. Some products had thousands of reviews, averaging 4 to 5 stars. Read through those reviews and you'll find a pattern. The 5-star reviews are enthusiastic. This stuff is amazing. Finally found something that actually helps with my anxiety and depression. I take it every day and feel like a new person. Best nootropic I've ever tried. Mental clarity is incredible. Can't imagine my life without it now. Bought this for my chronic pain and it works better than anything my doctor prescribed. These reviews sound positive, even life-changing. But read between the lines. I take it every day. Can't imagine my life without it. These are red flags for dependency, written by people who don't recognise what's happening to them yet. They think they've found a miracle supplement. They don't realise they're in the early stages of addiction. Scroll down to the 1-star reviews and the tone shifts dramatically. Do not buy this. I'm now addicted and going through the worst withdrawal of my life. This stuff ruined my finances, my relationships, and almost killed me. Started taking this for depression. Now I'm taking 15 capsules a day just to function. I've spent thousands of dollars and can't stop. Please don't make my mistake. This is not a supplement. It's a drug. A dangerous, addictive drug that shouldn't be legal. I've lost everything because of Tianeptine. The contrast is jarring. It's the same product. The glowing reviews are from people early in their use, experiencing the honeymoon phase before tolerance and dependence set in. The devastating reviews are from people months or years later, trapped in addiction and trying to warn others. Amazon's algorithm doesn't distinguish between these two groups. It just averages the ratings, giving products an overall score that obscures the danger. Some reviewers explicitly document their progression in multiple reviews. You can watch in real time as someone goes from great product. Day 3 and feeling amazing to 6 months later. Update. I'm now completely addicted. Spending $200 a week. Can't quit without help. Wish I'd never started. Other online marketplaces are even less regulated than Amazon. eBay sellers list Tianeptine powder, often in bulk quantities. A single purchase might be 50 or 100 grams, enough for months of use at therapeutic doses or weeks at addiction levels. Some sellers are clearly catering to addiction. They offer value packs of multiple bottles at discount prices. They advertise fast shipping and discreet packaging. They know exactly what they're selling and who's buying. Dedicated nootropics websites sell Tianeptine alongside other cognitive enhancers like racetams, modafinil analogues, and research chemicals. These sites often include detailed information about Tianeptine's pharmacology, dosing, and effects. More honest than the gas station bottles, but still downplaying the addiction risk. They'll mention that tolerance can develop and that some users experience withdrawal, but they frame it as manageable, as something that only happens to people who abuse it, not those who use it responsibly. The reality is that with Tianeptine, there's no clear line between responsible use and abuse. The therapeutic window is narrow, tolerance develops rapidly, and physical dependence can occur even at seemingly modest doses. But these websites don't emphasize that. They're selling a product, and scaring away customers is bad for business. Some sites have tried to implement responsible selling practices. A few require customers to certify they're over 18, that they've researched the substance and that they understand the risks. But these are checkbox exercises, legal disclaimers more than genuine safeguards. There's no verification. Anyone can click "I agree" and proceed to checkout. Payment processing is another issue. Major credit card companies and payment processors like PayPal have policies against facilitating drug sales. But Tianeptine exists in a grey zone. It's not illegal federally, and it's sold as a supplement. So many transactions go through without flags. When payment processors do crack down, suspending accounts or refusing to process Tianeptine sales, sellers simply switch to alternative payment methods. Cryptocurrency, wire transfers, cash apps, even mailed cash or money orders. International sellers add another layer of complexity. Many Tianeptine products are manufactured overseas, particularly in China and India, where pharmaceutical manufacturing costs are lower and regulations are lax. These products are imported in bulk, repackaged and sold online or distributed to gas stations. Quality control is minimal. Some products contain exactly what they claim. Others are underdosed, overdosed, or contaminated. Customs and Border Protection occasionally seizes Tianeptine shipments, especially after the FDA flagged it as a concern. But the volume of imported supplements is staggering. Millions of packages enter the US every month. Inspectors can't check everything. Most Tianeptine shipments sail through unchallenged, ready to be sold online or in stores. And when one platform cracks down, sellers migrate. In recent years, Amazon has removed many Tianeptine products following pressure from advocacy groups and negative press. But they didn't ban Tianeptine outright, they've just made it harder to find. Sellers adapt by using alternative names, listing it as an ingredient in proprietary blends, or marketing it under generic cognitive support products without highlighting the Tianeptine content. Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and even Reddit have been used for peer-to-peer Tianeptine sales. Someone with a stockpile trying to quit might sell their extra bottles. Someone in a banned state might buy from someone in a legal state. These transactions are unregulated, unsupervised, and essentially invisible to law enforcement. The online market for Tianeptine is a hydra. Cut off one head, ban it from Amazon, and 2 more grow back on obscure supplement websites. The internet has democratized access to substances, making global markets available from your phone. For Tianeptine users, this means convenience and availability. For people trying to quit, it means temptation is always just a few clicks away. And for regulators, it means a problem that's nearly impossible to solve without fundamental changes to how online commerce and supplements are regulated. It's like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. You might bail out a few drops, but the water keeps rushing back in. The reason Tianeptine keeps slipping through the cracks comes down to one frustrating reality. The supplement industry operates in a regulatory Wild West. The FDA can't pre-approve dietary supplements. They can only act after products cause harm, and even then, the process is slow, bureaucratic, and easily circumvented. Manufacturers know this, so when one state bans Tianeptine, they simply rebrand it, reformulate it slightly, or add it to a proprietary blend where the exact dosage doesn't have to be disclosed. It's a game of whack-a-mole, and the mole always wins. Some companies have even started labeling Tianeptine as for research purposes only, or not for human consumption. Legal disclaimers that mean absolutely nothing when the product is sitting next to energy drinks with a barcode and a price tag. Until federal lawmakers close this loophole with comprehensive legislation, Tianeptine and substances like it will continue to cycle through gas stations, smoke shops, and online marketplaces preying on the vulnerable and the uninformed. Let's rewind to 1994. Congress passed the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, known as DSHEA. At the time, it seemed reasonable, a law to ensure that vitamins, minerals, and herbal supplements could be sold without burdensome FDA pre-approval processes. The supplement industry argued that these products were safe, that they'd been used for generations, and that excessive regulation would limit consumer choice and stifle innovation. DSHEA established that dietary supplements were a category of food, not drugs. This distinction is crucial. Drugs must undergo rigorous testing for safety and efficacy before the FDA approves them for market. Supplements don't. Under DSHEA, manufacturers can introduce new supplements without notifying the FDA, without submitting safety data, and without proving they work. The only requirement is that ingredients must be generally recognized as safe, GRAS, or have been in the food supply before 1994, but here's the massive loophole. Dietary ingredient is defined broadly and vaguely. It includes vitamins, minerals, herbs, amino acids, and other botanical or dietary substances. Manufacturers have exploited this vagueness to include substances that have no business being sold as supplements, synthetic compounds, pharmaceutical analogues, even outright drugs like Tianeptine. Tianeptine doesn't meet the GRAS standard. It's a synthetic pharmaceutical compound, not a traditional food ingredient. It wasn't in the US food supply before 1994. By any reasonable interpretation, it shouldn't qualify as a dietary supplement. But enforcement is weak, and manufacturers know they can sell it for years before the FDA intervenes, if they intervene at all. The FDA's process for removing a dangerous supplement from the market is cumbersome. They must gather evidence of harm, document adverse events, sometimes conduct their own testing, and then issue warnings or pursue legal action against manufacturers. This can take years. Meanwhile, the product remains on shelves, generating revenue and harming consumers. Even when the FDA does act, the penalties are often minimal. Warning letters are issued, but they're not legally binding. The manufacturer might ignore them. The FDA can seize products, but only specific shipments. They can't ban a substance outright without going through the DEA's controlled substance scheduling process, which is even more complex and time-consuming. So manufacturers operate with impunity. They introduce Tianeptine, make money until regulators notice, then reformulate and rebrand when pressure mounts. They might add B vitamins or caffeine to the formula, change the brand name from Zaza Red to Energy Boost Pro, and continue selling essentially the same product. Because the supplement label doesn't have to list exact quantities, they can hide the tianeptine content in a proprietary blend, making it nearly impossible for consumers to know what they're taking. The "not for human consumption" label is another loophole exploit. Some manufacturers started adding this disclaimer to their products after facing legal pressure. The theory is that if the product is labelled as a research chemical, not intended for consumption, the manufacturer isn't liable for what people do with it. It's legal theatre, a transparent attempt to avoid regulation while continuing to sell a product everyone knows will be consumed. And it works. Gas stations and smoke shops stock these not-for-human consumption products right next to snacks and drinks. The cashier rings them up. The customer consumes them. Everyone involved knows exactly what's happening, but the disclaimer provides just enough legal cover to make enforcement difficult. The supplement lobby is powerful and wealthy. Organisations like the Council for Responsible Nutrition and the Natural Products Association spend millions on lobbying to maintain DSHEA and fight any efforts to increase regulation. They argue, correctly in some cases, that most supplements are safe and that increased regulation would harm small businesses and limit consumer access to beneficial products. But this argument ignores the dark side of the industry, the predatory manufacturers who exploit the lack of oversight to sell dangerous substances. The supplement industry is worth over $50 billion annually in the US alone. With that much money at stake, there's enormous resistance to meaningful reform. Several attempts have been made to close the loopholes. Senator Dick Durbin has repeatedly introduced legislation to give the FDA more authority over supplements, including mandatory adverse event reporting and more aggressive enforcement powers. These bills have gone nowhere, blocked by industry lobbying and lack of political will. The FDA has proposed rules to better define dietary supplements and exclude pharmaceutical drugs, but these rules are still in draft form years later, tied up in bureaucratic processes and legal challenges from manufacturers who stand to lose billions if enforcement becomes stricter. Meanwhile, Tianeptine is just one example. Dozens of other questionable substances are sold as supplements. Phenibut, a Russian pharmaceutical, kratom, an opioid-like botanical, synthetic cannabinoids disguised as herbal incense, and research chemicals with unknown safety profiles. Each one follows the same pattern: exploit the loophole, make money, rebrand if necessary, and keep selling until forced to stop. State bans help but create a patchwork of regulations that manufacturers navigate by selling in permissive states and shipping to restrictive ones. Federal action is the only real solution, but it requires Congress to revisit DSHEA, strengthen the FDA's authority, and stand up to a well-funded industry that doesn't want change. Until that happens, the loophole remains open, and substances like Tianeptine will continue to flow through it, legally sold to anyone with a few dollars and access to a gas station, while people's lives are destroyed and regulators scramble to catch up. It's not just a loophole, it's a chasm, and it's swallowing people whole. One of the cruelest ironies of the Tianeptine crisis is that many users initially bought it thinking they were making a healthy choice. They weren't looking for a high, they were looking for wellness. Maybe they'd heard about nootropics, those trendy brain-boosting supplements Silicon Valley types rave about. Maybe they were trying to quit coffee and wanted a natural energy alternative. Maybe they were athletes looking for a legal edge, or office workers trying to power through burnout. The packaging reinforced this belief. Bottles featured words like natural, herbal, cognitive support, and mood balance. It looked professional. It looked safe. And because it was sold in a store, not a dark alley, people assumed it had been tested, regulated, and approved. They assumed wrong. By the time they realised what they'd actually bought, their brain chemistry had already been hijacked. The betrayal is profound. People tried to take care of themselves and ended up trapped in a nightmare they never saw coming. Meet Jennifer, a 34-year-old nurse working 12-hour shifts at a busy hospital. She's exhausted, chronically, bone-deep exhausted. Between work, parenting 2 young kids, and managing a household, she barely has time to sleep, let alone take care of her own health. She's gained weight, her mood is low, and she's constantly anxious about keeping up with everything. Jennifer doesn't want to take prescription medications. She's seen too many patients struggle with side effects, dependencies, and the challenges of getting off psychiatric drugs. She wants something natural, something that will just give her a little boost to get through the day. She's heard co-workers talk about supplements that help with energy and focus, things like ginseng, rhodiola, B-complex vitamins. She decides to try some. One day, while picking up coffee at a gas station before her shift, Jennifer notices a display of bottles near the register. The labels are professional-looking, featuring images of brains with glowing neurons, words like cognitive enhancer and mood support prominently displayed. One product catches her eye: Mental Clarity Plus with Tianeptine and B vitamins. She's never heard of Tianeptine, but the bottle says it's a naturally derived supplement that supports healthy neurotransmitter function and promotes positive mood. It sounds perfect. It sounds like exactly what she needs, and it's only $12. She buys it, reads the label more carefully in her car, and takes 2 capsules as directed. She doesn't think to Google Tianeptine. Why would she? It's sold in a regular store alongside vitamins and energy drinks. It must be safe. The effect is almost immediate. Within 40 minutes, Jennifer feels good. Really good. The anxiety that's been her constant companion melts away. She feels energized but calm, focused but relaxed. Her shift flies by. She's patient with difficult patients, efficient with her tasks, and for the first time in months, she doesn't feel like she's drowning. When she gets home, she actually has the energy to play with her kids instead of collapsing on the couch. Jennifer is thrilled. She's finally found something that works. She starts taking it daily, sometimes twice a day, on particularly hard shifts. She recommends it to her co-workers. You should try this stuff, it's amazing. Really helps with energy and mood. A few of them buy bottles and have similar experiences. Within 3 weeks, Jennifer notices she needs more than the recommended dose to feel the same effects. She starts taking 3, then 4 capsules at a time. She's going through a bottle every few days instead of every week. The cost is adding up, but she justifies it. It's cheaper than therapy or prescription medications, and it's working. Or so she thinks. Then one day she forgets her bottle at home. By midway through her shift, she feels terrible, sweating, nauseous, shaky, anxious beyond anything she's experienced before. She thinks she's getting the flu and leaves work early. At home, she takes her Tianeptine, and within an hour, she feels fine. That's when the realization hits. She's not taking a supplement. She's dependent on something. Jennifer tries to research Tianeptine properly for the first time. What she finds horrifies her. Articles about addiction, withdrawal, hospitalizations, Reddit threads with thousands of people trapped in the same cycle. She feels stupid, betrayed, and terrified. How did this happen? She was trying to be healthy. She was trying to avoid medications. She bought something from a gas station that looked safe and legitimate. She tries to quit cold turkey. The withdrawal is unbearable, worse than anything she read about. She makes it 18 hours before she's back at the gas station buying more bottles with tears running down her face, the cashier avoiding eye contact because this scene is becoming familiar. Jennifer's story represents thousands of people who approach Tianeptine with good intentions. They weren't recreational drug users. They weren't trying to get high. They were trying to manage legitimate health concerns, chronic pain, depression, anxiety, fatigue, with what they believed was a safe legal supplement. The wellness industry has taught people to be skeptical of big pharma and to seek natural alternatives. This messaging isn't entirely wrong. Pharmaceutical companies have engaged in predatory practices, overprescribed medications and downplayed risks. But the backlash has created a false equivalency, that because something is natural or sold as a supplement, it must be safer than prescription drugs. Tianeptine exploits this belief. It's marketed using the language of wellness, holistic support, natural mood enhancement, cognitive optimization. It sits on shelves next to harmless products like vitamin C and fish oil, creating a halo of legitimacy by association. The manufacturers know exactly what they're doing. They're weaponizing people's desire to take care of themselves. Athletes are particularly vulnerable. Many sports organizations ban certain substances, so athletes look for legal alternatives that might give them an edge, improved focus, reduced anxiety, pain relief, faster recovery. Tianeptine seems perfect, legal, available, and effective, until it's not. Professional and amateur athletes have lost careers to tianeptine addiction, forced to withdraw from competition, failing drug tests when more sophisticated testing is used, or simply unable to function without constant dosing. Office workers, students, and entrepreneurs chasing productivity fall into the same trap. Silicon Valley's obsession with biohacking and nootropics has created a culture where taking supplements for cognitive enhancement is normalized, even celebrated. Tianeptine fits perfectly into this narrative, a smart drug that boosts mood and focus, until the user realizes they've biohacked themselves into addiction. The betrayal these users feel is real and profound. They made what they thought was a responsible choice. They read the label, followed the dosing instructions, and trusted that regulatory systems were protecting them. Instead, they were sold an addictive pharmaceutical drug disguised as a wellness product, and by the time they understood what was happening, it was too late. It's like going to a health food store for vitamins and accidentally buying chemotherapy. The packaging looked the same, but the consequences are catastrophic. Tianeptine addiction doesn't happen in a vacuum. It radiates outward, shattering relationships and families. Partners watch in horror as the person they love transforms into someone unrecognizable, secretive, irritable, withdrawn, and obsessed with getting to the gas station. Money disappears, lies pile up, trust evaporates. Some partners don't even know what tianeptine is at first. They just notice the bottles multiplying, the mood swings intensifying, the desperate 2 a.m. trips to find an open store. When they finally confront their loved one, they're met with denial, defensiveness, or tearful admissions that it's impossible to stop. Couples who were once solid find themselves in screaming matches over a substance most people have never heard of. Some relationships survive, most don't, and the addict is left even more isolated, more desperate and more dependent on the very thing destroying them. David and Maria had been married for 7 years. Good years, mostly. They had their struggles, who doesn't? But they loved each other, communicated well, and had built a life together. David worked in construction. Maria was a dental hygienist. They had a modest home, 2 cars, a dog, and plans to start trying for kids soon. Then David hurt his back at work. Nothing catastrophic, a herniated disc, manageable with physical therapy and pain management. He was prescribed opioids initially, but stopped taking them after a few weeks, worried about addiction. He'd seen too many friends and co-workers get hooked on pain pills. He didn't want to be another statistic. But the pain lingered, and his doctor was reluctant to prescribe more opioids given the scrutiny on pain management. David needed to work. They couldn't afford for him to be out long term, so he started looking for alternatives. A co-worker mentioned tianeptine, said it helped with his pain and wasn't addictive like the prescription stuff. David bought a bottle, tried it, and felt significant relief. Problem solved. Or so he thought. Maria noticed the bottles almost immediately. "What's this stuff you're taking?" she asked, picking one up from the kitchen counter. David explained it was just a supplement for pain and energy, something natural and legal. Maria was skeptical but didn't push. She trusted David, and he seemed to be functioning fine. But over the next few weeks, Maria noticed changes. David was going through the bottles fast. She saw him ordering more online multiple times a week. He was spending more time in the bathroom. He seemed edgy, snapping at her over small things that never used to bother him. And he was taking these pills constantly. She'd catch him dosing in the morning before work, during lunch, after dinner, before bed. "Are you sure that stuff is safe?" she asked one night. "You're taking a lot of it." David bristled. "It's fine. It's just a supplement. Would you rather I go back on the opioids?" The defensiveness in his voice was new, sharp. Maria backed off, not wanting to start a fight. Then she noticed money disappearing from their joint account. Small amounts at first, 20 here, 40 there, then hundreds. She checked their bank statements and saw constant charges to gas stations and online supplement vendors. When she added it up, David had spent over $2,000 in 1 month. Maria confronted him. "David, we need to talk about your spending. What the hell is going on?" David tried to lie, said it was work expenses, that he'd been buying supplies. But Maria wasn't stupid. She pressed, and eventually David broke down. He admitted he was addicted, that he needed the Tianeptine constantly to function, that he'd tried to stop and couldn't, because the withdrawal was unbearable. Maria's emotions cycled through shock, anger, betrayal, and finally fear. This wasn't the man she married. He turned into someone secretive and out of control. She insisted he get help, but David didn't know where to start. They called their insurance, searched for rehab centers, and hit wall after wall. Nobody knew how to treat Tianeptine addiction. The fight started. Maria felt lied to and betrayed. David felt judged and alone. He'd promised to cut back, to taper, to quit. But every promise was broken within days or hours. Maria would find hidden bottles stashed in the garage, in his truck, in the pockets of his work pants. The trust between them, built over years, crumbled in weeks. Maria tried to control it, hiding his wallet, monitoring his phone, even calling gas stations near his work, asking them not to sell to him. But David always found a way. He'd borrow money from co-workers, use cash advances on credit cards she didn't know about, or buy Tianeptine online when she thought she'd cut off his access. The emotional toll was devastating. Maria felt like she was living with a stranger. She grieved the loss of her husband, even though he was still physically present. Some nights she'd cry herself to sleep, wondering if he loved the Tianeptine more than he loved her. David, drowning in addiction, was too consumed by the need to avoid withdrawal to properly show up for his wife. He was physically there, but emotionally absent, his entire existence revolving around dosing schedules. Intimacy disappeared. They stopped having sex. They stopped having meaningful conversations. They stopped laughing together. The relationship became transactional and adversarial. Maria trying to control the addiction, David trying to hide it. They were trapped in a cycle of surveillance and deception, each playing roles neither wanted. Eventually Maria issued an ultimatum: "Get serious help or I'm leaving." David wanted to comply, truly wanted to, but he was paralyzed by fear of withdrawal and by the lack of accessible treatment. They found one rehab center 3 hours away that would take him, but it cost $15,000 up front, and their insurance wouldn't cover it because Tianeptine wasn't recognized. They couldn't afford it. The ultimatum hung in the air, unmet. And slowly, Maria began to emotionally detach, preparing herself for the possibility that she might have to leave to protect herself. She started sleeping in the guest room, She opened a separate bank account. She talked to a divorce lawyer just to understand her options. David knew he was losing her but felt powerless to stop it. The Tianeptine had become more important than his marriage. Not because he wanted it to be, but because the addiction wouldn't allow any other hierarchy. Every decision, every moment of his day was dictated by avoiding withdrawal. His wife's pain, his marriage crumbling, his future disappearing, all of it felt distant and abstract compared to the immediate terror of being without Tianeptine. This scenario plays out in homes across the country. Relationships that survive job losses, health crises, and normal life stresses can't survive Tianeptine addiction. The secrecy, the financial drain, the personality changes, the constant lying. It's corrosive in ways that few other challenges are. Partners feel helpless, watching someone they love destroy themselves with something they bought at a gas station. The absurdity of it makes the pain even sharper. It's like watching your spouse drown. In a puddle, it shouldn't be possible, but it's happening and you can't pull them out. Every Tianeptine user eventually has the same thought. I'll just taper down slowly. It sounds logical. You reduce your dose by a little bit each day until you're free. Clean, controlled, manageable. But Tianeptine has other plans. The withdrawal hits so fast and so hard that even small reductions feel unbearable. Users report trying to cut back and lasting maybe a few hours before the symptoms become overwhelming. Nausea, panic, full body pain. So they cave and take more, promising themselves they'll try again tomorrow. Tomorrow comes, they try again, they fail again. Some people spend months, even years, trapped in this cycle, desperately wanting to quit but unable to tolerate even the smallest decrease. The taper becomes a cruel joke, a false hope that keeps them chained to the bottle while their life continues to unravel around them. Let's walk through what a Tianeptine taper actually looks like in practice, because the gap between theory and reality is a chasm. Day 1 of the taper plan. Sarah decides she's going to quit Tianeptine. She's been taking about 3 grams per day, roughly 6 bottles for 8 months. Her life is falling apart, her savings are gone and she's ready to be done. She researches online and finds tapering guides. The recommended approach is to reduce by 10% every few days, allowing her nervous system to adjust gradually. She does the math. If she reduces by 300 milligrams every 3 days, she'll be off Tianeptine completely in about a month. It sounds doable. She measures out her dose carefully, setting aside exactly 2.7 grams for day 1, a 10% reduction. For the first few hours, she feels okay. Maybe a little more anxious than usual, a little edgier, but manageable. She's proud of herself. She's doing it. By hour 4, the anxiety intensifies. Her skin starts to feel prickly. Her legs get restless. By hour 6, she's struggling. The discomfort isn't unbearable yet, but it's insistent, demanding her attention. She keeps checking the clock, calculating how long until her next dose. By hour 8, she's in significant distress, sweating, nauseous, panicky. She takes her next scheduled dose and gets maybe 90 minutes of relief before the discomfort creeps back in. She makes it through day 1 technically, but she barely slept, and the next morning she's exhausted and anxious just thinking about another day of this. She measures out her day 2 dose, another 10% reduction, and tries to stick with it. She lasts until mid-afternoon before the withdrawal becomes too much. She takes an extra dose, telling herself she'll make up for it tomorrow. She's already off plan by day 2. Day 3, she tries to reset. This time she reduces by only 5% instead of 10%. But even that small reduction brings on withdrawal symptoms she can't tolerate. By evening she's back to her original dose, the taper abandoned. She feels like a failure, weak and undisciplined. But the reality is that Tianeptine's short half-life and the severity of its withdrawal make tapering extraordinarily difficult without medical support. The problem is pharmacological. Tianeptine leaves your system fast. Within 3 to 4 hours, blood levels have dropped significantly. This rapid clearance means that even maintaining a steady dose requires frequent redosing. When you try to taper, you're asking your nervous system to cope with lower levels of tianeptine, while still experiencing the rapid fluctuations that trigger withdrawal symptoms throughout the day. Your brain doesn't adjust smoothly. It doesn't gradually downregulate its dependence. Instead, it panics, flooding your system with stress hormones, triggering withdrawal symptoms, and creating an overwhelming drive to dose. Fighting this neurochemical imperative with willpower alone is like trying to hold your breath until you pass out. Eventually, your body overrides your conscious decision and forces you to act. Some users try creative tapering strategies. One approach is substitution, switching to longer-acting opioids like buprenorphine or kratom, which have longer half-lives and potentially easier tapers. This can work, but it requires access to these substances and often just trades one dependency for another. Buprenorphine, while used in medical detox, is itself an opioid that requires careful management to taper successfully. Others try rapid microtapers, reducing their dose by tiny amounts multiple times throughout the day, trying to smooth out the peaks and valleys. But this requires obsessive measurement, constant attention to dosing schedules, and still doesn't eliminate withdrawal symptoms. It just spreads them out. Some people stockpile tianeptine before starting a taper, afraid they won't have enough to complete their plan. But having a large supply creates temptation. One bad day, one intense craving, and they blow through their carefully measured doses, resetting the cycle. The psychological component makes it even harder. Tianeptine withdrawal isn't just physical, it's profoundly emotional. The depression, the anhedonia, the sense that life will never be okay again. These psychological symptoms undermine motivation and make it nearly impossible to stick with a taper plan. You're asking someone in the depths of despair to exercise discipline, patience, and delayed gratification. It's an unreasonable ask. Online support communities try to help. Experienced users share their taper schedules, offer encouragement, and provide reality checks when someone's plan is too aggressive. But even with support, success rates are low. Most people attempt multiple tapers before succeeding, if they succeed at all. Medical supervision would make a huge difference. A doctor could prescribe comfort medications, gabapentin for anxiety and restlessness, clonidine for autonomic symptoms, sleep, aids, anti-nausea drugs. They could monitor progress, adjust the taper speed based on symptoms, and provide accountability. But most people don't have access to tianeptine-informed medical care, so they're doing this alone, in their bedrooms, with nothing but willpower and internet advice. And every failed taper reinforces the feeling of hopelessness. I can't even cut back a little bit. How will I ever quit completely? The tianeptine feels more powerful with each failure, the addiction more insurmountable. People get trapped in a cycle of attempting to taper, failing, berating themselves, trying again, failing again. Months or years pass this way, wanting to quit, trying to quit, but never quite managing to break free. It's like being stuck on a treadmill that speeds up every time you try to slow down. You're exhausted, you want off, but stepping away means falling, and falling means pain you can't bear. Even when people manage to scrape together the money and courage to seek professional help, they often hit another wall. Medical detox facilities that don't recognize tianeptine as a legitimate crisis. Because it's not a well-known drug, some intake coordinators dismiss it as just a supplement, or not as serious as real opioids. Insurance companies sometimes refuse to cover treatment, claiming tianeptine isn't a recognized substance use disorder. People are turned away or told to detox at home, which for most is virtually impossible. The few facilities that do accept tianeptine patients often treat them with standard opioid protocols, which sometimes work, but not always. Tianeptine's unique pharmacology means it doesn't fit neatly into existing treatment models. It's too new, too obscure, and the medical community is still figuring out how to handle it. In the meantime, people suffer through detox in their bedrooms, their bathrooms, their cars, anywhere but the medical setting they desperately need. Marcus finally reached his breaking point. After 18 months of Tianeptine addiction, spending nearly $40,000, losing his job and alienating his family, he was ready to get help. He called his insurance company's behavioral health line, explained his situation, and asked for a referral to a detox facility. The intake coordinator was polite but confused. "I'm sorry. You're addicted to what?" "Tianeptine. It's sold in gas stations. It's kind of like an opioid." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "I'm not seeing that in our system. Can you spell it?" Marcus spelled it out, explained what it was, and emphasized that his withdrawal symptoms were severe and he needed medical detox. The coordinator put him on hold, came back 10 minutes later. "Our clinical team says that Tianeptine isn't covered under your substance abuse benefit because it's not a controlled substance. They recommend you speak with your primary care doctor." Marcus felt his hope deflating. "But I'm addicted. I need help. I can't detox at home. The withdrawal is too severe. I understand, but our facilities are for alcohol and drug detox. Tianeptine is classified as a supplement, so it doesn't qualify. I'm sorry." Marcus hung up, furious and desperate. He started calling detox centers directly, bypassing insurance. The first 3 he called had never heard of Tianeptine. The 4th had heard of it, but didn't accept patients for it. "We're primarily an opioid detox program, and our medical protocols are designed for traditional opioids like heroin or oxycodone. We're not equipped to handle Tianeptine." Finally, Marcus found a facility willing to take him. The catch: it would cost $8,000 out of pocket for a 5-day detox program, and they couldn't guarantee that their treatment protocols would be effective for Tianeptine since they had limited experience with it. But Marcus was desperate. He borrowed money from his parents, checked himself in, and hoped for the best. The detox center did their best. They treated Marcus with a standard opioid withdrawal protocol, clonidine for blood pressure and anxiety, gabapentin for nerve pain and restlessness, ondansetron for nausea and sleep aids. They monitored his vital signs and kept him hydrated, but Tianeptine withdrawal hit harder than the staff expected. Marcus was vomiting multiple times an hour, shaking uncontrollably, and experiencing such severe anxiety that he felt like he was losing his mind. On day 2, the medical director consulted with colleagues and decided to try buprenorphine, a medication commonly used for opioid addiction. They gave Marcus a low dose, hoping it would ease his symptoms. It helped somewhat. The physical symptoms became more tolerable, though the psychological distress remained intense. But here's the problem. Buprenorphine is itself an opioid, and now Marcus was being treated for Tianeptine addiction with another addictive substance. The medical team explained they would taper him off the buprenorphine over the next few days, but Marcus worried he was just trading one dependence for another. Still, it was better than the alternative. By day 5, Marcus was stable enough to discharge. He was still uncomfortable, still experiencing post-acute withdrawal symptoms, but the crisis had passed. The facility referred him to an outpatient addiction treatment program and sent him home with a short-term buprenorphine prescription. Marcus's experience was relatively good compared to many others. He found a facility willing to help. He had access to money, borrowed but still, and the treatment was partially effective. Many people aren't that fortunate. Some detox facilities flat out refuse Tianeptine patients. They're worried about liability, about treating a substance they don't understand, about what happens if something goes wrong. Their insurance doesn't cover them for experimental treatments, and tianeptine falls outside their established protocols. Others accept patients but provide inadequate care because the staff simply don't know enough. They treat it like mild opioid withdrawal, send the patient home after 3 days, and are surprised when the person relapses immediately because the withdrawal was far from over. Some facilities have learned through trial and error. They've adapted their protocols, shared knowledge with colleagues, and developed better treatment approaches. But this knowledge isn't widespread. There's no standard textbook chapter on tianeptine detox. There's no official clinical guideline from major medical organizations. Every facility is essentially experimenting, learning as they go. The insurance barrier is massive. Even when facilities will accept tianeptine patients, insurance companies often deny claims. The diagnostic codes used for billing don't include tianeptine-specific substance use disorders. Claims get kicked back, facilities won't treat without payment assurance, and patients are stuck with impossible choices. Pay thousands of dollars out of pocket they don't have, or try to detox at home without medical supervision. For patients who can't access detox facilities, the home detox experience is brutal. They're alone, unsupported, going through what may be the worst experience of their lives with no medical oversight. If complications arise, seizures, severe dehydration, cardiac issues, they have to make it to an emergency room where staff may not understand what's happening. The lack of institutional knowledge creates a cascade of problems. ER doctors don't know how to treat it. Addiction counsellors haven't been trained on it. Primary care doctors have never encountered it. So patients bounce from provider to provider, each one shrugging and saying, "I've never heard of this before," while the patient suffers and their addiction deepens. Some areas are starting to improve. In states where tianeptine has been banned and cases have spiked, local medical communities are beginning to develop expertise. Conferences include sessions on tianeptine treatment. Case studies are published. Medical schools are slowly adding it to curricula. But this knowledge dissemination takes years, and in the meantime, thousands of people need help now. The cruelty is compounded by the fact that this is a preventable crisis. If tianeptine had never been allowed on store shelves, none of these people would need specialized detox protocols. The medical system is being forced to develop emergency responses to a problem that regulatory failure created. It's like watching fire departments scramble to develop new techniques to fight fires, while someone keeps handing out matches and gasoline. The firefighters are doing their best, but they shouldn't have to fight these fires in the first place. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep in a world where the words dietary supplement can mean the difference between wellness and addiction, take a moment to think about the thousands of people trapped in this crisis right now. They're lying awake at this very moment, not because they chose to become addicts, not because they were reckless or irresponsible, but because they walked into a gas station looking for relief and walked out with a nightmare disguised as a bottle of pills. The tianeptine crisis isn't just a story about one dangerous substance slipping through regulatory cracks. It's a story about everything that's broken in how we handle healthcare, mental health, pain management, and addiction in this country. It's about people so desperate for help, for energy to get through their shifts, for relief from chronic pain, for escape from depression and anxiety, that they're willing to try anything, even a sketchy bottle from a convenience store shelf. These aren't faceless statistics. They're nurses working double shifts, construction workers with bad backs, students drowning in academic pressure, parents trying to hold their families together while falling apart inside. They're people who did what they thought was the responsible thing, avoided prescription opioids, sought legal alternatives, read the labels, followed the instructions, and they were betrayed by a system that values profit over protection, that allows manufacturers to exploit loopholes, and that leaves vulnerable people to navigate a marketplace designed to trap them. The resilience of people fighting tianeptine addiction is extraordinary. They wake up every day knowing that withdrawal is waiting, that cravings will ambush them, that the gas station is right there, always open, always stocked. And still, many of them keep trying to quit. They document their attempts online, support strangers going through the same hell, and refuse to give up hope even when the system has given up on them. They're fighting a battle that shouldn't exist, showing courage that should never have been necessary. But resilience shouldn't be required for survival. People shouldn't have to be heroes just to escape something they bought legally at a Chevron. The fact that Tianeptine remains on shelves in most of America, that teenagers can buy it without question, that people are still discovering it and falling into the same trap, that's not a personal failure. That's a policy failure. That's a regulatory failure. That's a collective failure of a society that hasn't figured out how to protect people from predatory industries hiding behind legal loopholes. So as you settle into your bed tonight, maybe with melatonin or chamomile tea nearby, substances you trust because you assume someone somewhere has verified they're safe, think about how easily it could have been different, how easily you could have picked up that wrong bottle, trusted that misleading label, believed that professional packaging. The line between I'm taking care of myself and I'm accidentally destroying my life has never been thinner or more arbitrary. The people who've survived Tianeptine addiction, who've fought through withdrawal, who've rebuilt their lives after losing everything, they're not just survivors, they're witnesses. They're sounding alarms that most of the country isn't hearing yet. They're trying to warn others away from a trap that's still being set, still being sold, still waiting for the next person who's tired, hurting, and hoping a bottle from the gas station might help. History will look back on this moment and wonder how we let it happen, how we allowed a known pharmaceutical drug to be sold as a supplement, how we watched people suffer and die while bureaucrats debated regulations, how we prioritized industry profits over human lives. But history isn't some distant observer. It's being written right now by the choices we make, the policies we demand, and the people we decide are worth protecting. So tonight, as you close your eyes and drift towards sleep, carry this with you. The Tianeptine crisis is still happening. Right now, someone is taking their first dose, not knowing what's coming. Someone else is taking their 100th dose of the day, trapped in a cycle they can't escape. And someone, somewhere, is trying to quit, lying in bed, sweating and shaking, hoping tomorrow will be the day they finally break free. They're not asking for pity. They're asking for change, for accountability, for a system that actually protects people instead of leaving them to fend for themselves in a marketplace full of legal poison. They're asking for what should have been there from the beginning: oversight, regulation, and the basic assumption that if something is sold next to the Doritos, it shouldn't be capable of destroying your life. Sweet dreams. And maybe tomorrow we'll all wake up and decide that gas stations shouldn't be pharmacies, that supplements shouldn't be drugs, and that people looking for help deserve to find it, not addiction disguised in a bottle with a barcode and a lie. Because if we don't, there will be more stories, more people, more families torn apart, more lives lost to something that should never have been on those shelves in the first place. Sleep well, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous things in life don't look dangerous at all. They look legal, accessible, and safe, until they're not.